Today's topic is the process of process improvement. I will introduce you what it is or what we suggest as a baseline. Then you can build your own flavor on top of that. So the process of process improvement is a method to systematically, consistently, and efficiently improve processes across your organization. We believe it's very important to have a process just at least as a starting point when you're engaging with teams. So very typically people using Skore internally will be sort of working with other teams. Having the process shows that you're in control, you know what's going on. It helps people understanding what will be the step to get a change done. And as a result, increase the adoption of this change that you will make in your organization. So the most important role for this process, there are three. There are the change champion, which will be the one running the project, sort of a project manager if you want. The process owner, if the role is clearly defined in your organization, will be the person that will allocate material and human resources and will also validate the change ultimately. But don't neglect the managers in the middle. So the process owner may not be the direct manager of all the people involved in the process. So the management layer is very important in changes, because if they are not on board, that's gonna be a real problem. They need to be the steward of the change. That's what they expected from them. But managers have they have the schedule of employees usually, especially the change champion, to set their priorities. And it's the role of the manager to ensure that teams have time to work in the processes, doing their day job, but as well on the processes, making sure the processes are fit for the purpose. So don't neglect, and this is a lessons learned. That's why I always insist on that. But manager is very important role layer to have on board in any change. So what is this process about? It's very simple. It's a starting point. You can customize it. You can make it more complex for your organization. But essentially, you want to understand where you are today, where you want to be, and define a path to get there. In hindsight, we could close the topic here. Okay, now we'll deep dive into the details. But this is essentially what you need to bring people in your journey. Okay, understand where you are today, understand where you want to be tomorrow, and understand how you make the transition from one to the other. Something that is very important in all these transformation improvements is to keep the cycle as short as possible. So if you don't have the resources to do the workshops to define the change, to define the new processes, if people are coming but not willingly, and you need to fight with managers to get the resources, just give up and move to another team, move to another project. But you need to do that short and sharp over a couple of weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks maximum, but don't let it drag for month and month. Don't start something in June if you know that everyone is going on holidays mid-July. Don't start something beginning of December if everyone is switched off for the rest of the year. Okay, now I suggest that we deep dive into the little process that we suggest. And I will explain the big picture, where we are now. It's all about understanding the processes and creating a shared understanding. While you are mapping the processes in Skore, it's very easy to identify two things. You can identify your opportunities. I will do that live while we are mapping. The best way is to use the custom fields, I find. So you can create a custom fields called improvement opportunity, or a name that is suitable for your case. And then you can group them. Is it a technology decisions? You can add as many custom fields. So we can have a new field in the ERP to document blah blah blah. And then what the benefit of Skore and the mapping at the speed of conversation is that you can capture these things as you're talking, as you're mapping the process. Okay, wouldn't it we're doing that? Would it be better if we were doing that? So then I capture a lot of improvements opportunity. We will sort them later. Structure, the project manager should be closer to the operations team, for example. So then you can define later, refine it, but capture everything you want at the time of capture using the custom fields. If you are in a more advanced context, you can also create custom forms with more fields, but the improvement opportunity and the little grouping helps you get it started, helps you capturing information without interrupting the flow of the workshop. Okay, so this is also done by the change champion. I forgot the role. What you have at this stage, you have opportunities and constraints. Constraints are very important. Because at this stage, you need to understand what would block the change. What are the main block for this change to not happen? So that's something you can capture as you're mapping the process. Then you will add, taking all these changes that you've done, so using the reporting tool, for example, or the analytics, taking the analytics, we can see, all right, we have captured 3 improvement opportunities. There's at least 1 role involved, but in a real process, there will be much more than that. How many the type of changes, what are the systems they involve, etc., etc. So in Skore, you will have, it will surface all the information around these changes that you've just captured, and it will be very valuable information to help you positioning the change later. So let's go there now. Let's go in there in how do we get there, and so we will map the future process. So if here I'm capturing the as-is or as-is plus, as we sometimes call it, because there will be a little wishful thinking of what we do today, then it's about deep diving and mapping the future process. The benefit of doing in Skore is that you can also capture different scenarios, okay? Scenario 1 or phases, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Very good. If you want to keep that short and sweet, you may want to push things to a phase 2 and do what is the bare minimum. We were 10 years ago, the hot word was the MVP, the minimum viable product or process, minimum viable process. What is the minimum amount of change we can do to have an impact? And then we do in phase 2, we start to complexify or deal with edge cases. I remember a project where there was all sorts of complexity for dealing with non-Roman characters on translations. And then at the time, it would have been better to make them out of scope. They keep running on the old process, and then we can move on with the Roman characters, which was covering most of the impacted population in Europe. So we could have moved on. We should have done that. Moved on with Roman characters, and then take the case of the other alphabets later down the line. Obviously, it's interesting to know that it will happen, so it helps you making changes to the systems, for example, making sure you support non-Roman characters, but we can still move on. I can't remember now all the details of the implications. When you're mapping the processes, you will better understand the impact on systems, the legal regulatory constraints, to make sure that your process is compliant, very important, and also the impact on roles and people. Processes, you can automate as much as you want. There will always be people involved. So be careful to keep an eye on, these are the roles impacted, and this is what they need to be trained. Skore is great because once you've mapped your 2B processes here, you can almost output the training materials. With pretty much 0 changes in your process, you can have training materials ready to go. So that's a huge benefit. Out of that, depending on the size of the change, you may want to build a business case. So business case is just saying, right, this is what we need to make the change happen, and this is the benefits we expect in return. There's lots of templates online for building a business case, but essentially it's a clear articulation. Typically takes the shape of a PowerPoint document with maybe a little associated Excel file, or at least a table showing costs, and then get the change approved. Typically in an organization, the process owner will approve the change, but again, depending on the structure of your process, how many teams it will span, the managers that are impacted by the managers of teams impacted by this change, getting them on board is absolutely critical, especially when you're implementation, you need their resources. You need to take someone out of their team for a day a week or 2 days a week to do UAT or some changes on systems. So here you've defined how to get there. And then a change, the proper preparation prevents poor performance. If you're doing that properly with the right people involved, in a short and sweet manner, not having workshops that are dragging forever on month and month, implementing the changes, you've done most of the work. Now implementing the work is about making it work. There's many things it can be involved, your job, your context. Making the system changes, they usually take the longest, so I put them first, because that's probably going, I don't know, if you're using a development agency or if you have an internal IT department, you need to raise tickets, so they take months. So start there, understand their timelines, because it will probably be the most critical path. business rules to change, documents and templates, policies, I have it twice. And then people. So if you need to hire new roles for performing a process, this can also take a lot of time, especially if you're sourcing that externally. Reorganize the teams, as per my example of putting a project manager directly in operations team, so they are closer to the work, closer to the same incentives, same managers. Maybe it can be fairly easy-ish to do. And the training of people. Don't underestimate the power of training, because the output of having a proper training, and this is where the process loops magically, let's say, when you have proper training and people are following the new process, doing the next phase of change is even more fast. Okay, so the baseline of doing a change, as we captured here, is to have people on board and a shared understanding of where you are today. So you need to make sure that where you are today is also the output of the process in the end. So that was a short template that we offer you here. Your version may or may not be more complicated than that, but what's important when you're starting a change is to have a process that describes how it will happen. Now, if you're telling people this is what we will do, this is how all the steps that we need to go through, maybe it will be a bit scary for people, but at least there is a path can be followed and it's clear, and you can add timelines, you can add the real roles that you have in your organization, the people, etc. But that should make the transition to a new reality much more straightforward. I'm reiterating what I said earlier. The faster you do this process, the more improvements you will do and the more impact you will see. Okay, don't make changes over months and months. Start small, do small changes, and then once you get used to the process, it will be easier to tackle bigger and bigger changes over time. There's always this problem in organizations, sometimes getting budgets for people to work on the processes rather than in the processes. You need to make something very big, but that's a culture change. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago in a drop-in called The Culture of Continuous Improvements. And the message is the same. Start small, do small changes often rather than big bang changes that are failing and frustrating everyone. Okay, so I can share a story. So keeping the cycle short, the main problem we had in a specific example where people were not fully dedicated to that is we decided to meet once a month to do this process improvements. So once a month we will all reconvene, and of course some people were missing a month and they were coming the next month. And essentially it was a day a month, face to face. It was in the before times. And every month we were basically starting the project from scratch, because everyone forgot the decisions that were made the time before, or the concessions they did, or every time we had to re-argue have the same debates over and over again, because the changes we were proposing were quite radical, and we had to sell to the team internally every month again what we do. I have to do this project again, I would have said, all right, I'd rather do 6 days in one shot in 6 months rather than one day a month for 6 months. So taking exactly the same amount of resources, 1 day a month, but I would have done that in 6 days in a row, if possible, or maybe twice 3 days over 2 weeks, and get that done once, and then not talk about it anymore. So this was a big mistake, to let it drag, to accept the fact that it was only 1 day a month. What happened in the end? It was that managers were not on board. So they said, okay, for 1 day a month, because that's pretty much invisible in the workload of people. Okay, for 1 day a month, but not more. What we should have said at this stage is, all right, this change is not important for you. So 1 day a month is pretty much the same as 0 day of month. So let's abort this mission. Let's find another team which we can work, we can help, and they want to commit a bit more resources, and we can move on.
But I think, as we've spoken about before, I think keeping it simple, especially at the start, it depends on how mature your organisation is around process management and improvement. But try and keep it as simple as you can to start with. People have day jobs. Often you're going out as a business; they're going to be the ones that are owning it. They've got their day-to-day activities, and you're asking them to do something more. Make sure you package that up in as easy as possible way for them to understand. And that means about what is the language you need to use, what does being a process owner mean, and then you can always complicate it if you need to, add bits into it later on. But I think that's really the key. One of the sort of things I've seen missed out of these processes, which are quite, is how do you measure the benefits of the change? That's twofold, because if you can define how you're going to measure the benefits, it's a qualifier for when someone suggests an improvement. So if you can't measure it, is it really going to be a benefit? And don't bear in mind that this process is circular. So how are we embedding that continuous process of improvement change into the organization? So again, don't underestimate the effort, but the thought you need to put into how do we keep this stuff alive. And that might be simple things like changing out process owners, for no other reason as to just get fresh blood into that role. Doesn't have to be the head of a department, or head of a division that has to own all the processes. You can push that ownership out to the people, and guess what? You might actually get better adoption and better feedback. I guess that's one example. But there's lots to it.
Definitely. Yeah, the measure of the change, it can be as simple as a little sentence, or you can have something that you can measure with like hard numbers. But it can be in a sentence. In the future, doing this should take a day and not a month, or and then you can start. You can measure, quantify if you want.
And then they all ripple up into the actual initiative. You can actually say, look, initiative delivering, because it is an effort. It is an investment in time that you need to put into this. So what are the benefits, quantifiable and otherwise? Record them as you go through. get that step in the process somewhere. Put it somewhere, and then you can then put it out, and it's then when you need it. Always going back, saying, well, what's the good stuff we've done over the last year? That's always a challenge.
Definitely. Another story of a change that the benefit was hard to quantify, because the current process was such a mess that just having people to follow the same was already a benefit by itself. There were also, so we were creating a little systems to submit stuffs to be approved, essentially. There was an extra benefit that was very hard to quantify, but brought really a strong case for this, for having this thing approved, was the compliance we could show evidence for when it was systematized. So in the past, so what was the current? It was doing Excel files sent per email, someone reconciliating them and basically trying to do stuff with it. Now we said, all right, everyone will submit these files into a system. It should be faster, we think, but maybe not, because there's still some work to do. But everything will be in system, and then we can really master when we have a single database with all the numbers and stuff. But the extra benefit in the end was really the compliance. It was that we knew which countries sent their data. We knew which things were acted on or approved or rejected and things like that, where in the past it was all per email. It was all taking time, very hard to measure, because it was just one email here, one email there, we forward. We're not counting 30 seconds each time, so very hard to quantify how long the process was taking, but definitely was better in the system. And this change worked quite well because it was done in a very, very iterative way with the team. They were on board with having a V1 that didn't have all the features. And that was a bit of a culture shock at the beginning, because they were not used to that, to be given softwares that couldn't do everything. But we managed to explain, this is how we're going to do. This is not going to support multi-currency at the beginning. This is not going to the system will be in English only, etc. And then over time, we managed to do improvements. Like what we added more notifications, more reports, the multi-currency, etc. Great. So these drop-in sessions are held every week on Wednesday. So we hope to see you all next week.